Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 620. Currently in the midst of US film festival circuit is Scrap, an intimate family drama that stars Vivian Kerr as Beth, a recently laid off single mother who struggles to hide her homelessness from her estranged brother Ben, played by Anthony Rapp. An engrossing story of navigating the realities and delusions of life in modern-day Los Angeles. Scrap also marks the feature film directorial debut of Vivian Kerr, who also stars, writes, and produces a film that currently stands at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, winning awards at different festivals around the US. And I'm sure this is a film that hopefully a lot of people will get to see soon because, Vivian, I think you've done a really great job here. And I just want to thank you so much for reaching out to me and for agreeing to be on the show today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the film. That means a lot to me. As you said, it's my first feature.
Interestingly, though, even though it's a first feature, it's you kind of touched on material before in a short film back in 2018, I think it came out. I'm really curious because sometimes when I talk to filmmakers about the whole transition from short to feature, sometimes the feature is something they have in mind first, and they'll make the short and try to get some interest in it. Sometimes the short just is just the first step, and then the feature comes afterwards. What was it? What was the idea with Scrap? Did you always have the feature in mind, or was it the short film that you first had in mind, and that kind of evolved into what people will potentially see by the end of the year?
A little bit of both, I think. So the short film. So first, I should say I didn't direct the short film. So
Yes.
what ended up happening is I had this idea for this story, and I knew I wanted it to be a feature, and I I was open to not directing it. I wasn't quite sure at that point whether or not it was going to be my first feature, even though I had wanted to direct for a really long time. So, and I also felt like I didn't know if there'd be any interest in the story. I didn't know if there'd be an audience for it. So the way I imagined the story, I sort of thought, okay, well, I have sort of the opening, the beginning of the film, the first like 15 minutes. So I'll just write that and, make it a short film and just take it out to festivals and see if there is an audience. So I brought on a director to do the short, Anthony Rapp, who's in the feature. He also was in the short.
Mm.
And it was really meeting him and us kind of finding that brother sister dynamic. I remember on set working with him, I had this epiphany that he was really like the perfect Ben. There was nobody else who could play that role. And from that day on, I was like, I essentially wrote the rest of the feature with him in mind. So I tried to, I think, tailor it to his strengths as an actor and to sort of expand on the dynamic that we had had on set together with the short. And then as I was working on it over the span of several years, it finally came to the point where I realized like I had to direct it. It just mattered so much to me. I couldn't let it go. So yeah, so I knew it was going to be a feature, but then we also did it as a short just to kind of see if there was interest. And the short did really well in the festival circuit, and the rest is history.
What's really interesting about Scrap as well is that this is an independent feature, and I've talked to many independent filmmakers, different roads travel to try to get financing behind it. Some people do Kickstarter, some people just reach out to, family, friends, for example. You went through this platform called WeFunder, which I never heard of before. And it seems like a really interesting, like kind of like entrepreneurs, kind of startup kind of stuff coming in there. How did you find out about WeFunder? How did you find that experience? Because like I said, I haven't heard of it before. Maybe there'll be other filmmakers listening that might find some interest in how that came on your radar, and what was the experience like in raising funds through that platform?
Honestly, the platform, I'd heard about it through other filmmaker friends who had raised money for their feature, and they hadn't raised a ton of money, but they had raised at least some that it was like they'd raised at least enough money to kind of kick off production. I don't know if they had raised, enough money for post-production and distribution, all of that, but it was at least something to get started. And the journey of trying to get Scrap financed was like, I mean, it was like having, your Jeep stuck in the mud and the wheels are
Mm.
just going and kicking up all the mud. Like nothing was happening. I remember having a meeting with a production company in Beverly Hills, and they were like, we're on board with Scrap, and like, it's going to be on our slate, and we're going to, find the money. And it felt like a done deal. And then that disappeared. And so it occurred to me that if I just kept waiting and, taking meetings and trying to get other companies on board, that it could be like 5 more years before I even got to shoot it. And I just was not willing to wait anymore. So yeah, I decided I would make a a page on WeFunder and solicit equity crowdfunding donations. Well, not donations, it is equity, but try to see if there'd be any interest. And if I couldn't raise the whole budget, at least I could raise a little bit just to get started. And luckily we were able to raise almost all of our budget on that platform.
That's awesome, because I absolutely love when I talk to filmmakers and they have a goal, they have a vision, and they have to work really hard to achieve it. And I think some people really don't realize what it takes to really get a film even just started, to get off the ground. Like, like the plane is on the runway, but you need to get it up in the air, right? And a lot of that, there's a lot of prep to go in there. And what I really love about what you've done with your film as well is that you put together a really great team around you. You need a team. Like, a director has the vision, you have the story, but you need making a film is a team effort. And you got Marcus Spencer, who's your cinematographer, is very prolific as both a cinematographer and camera operator. Toby Yates is the son of Peter Yates, who's a director who did Bullet. He's your editor, and a lot of other cool people in your crew as well. What was it like assembling that crew, assembling your team to be there? Because not only do you need, people to work on this independent film, but considering it's your first feature directorial debut as well, I imagine you need a sort of a support system around you to make sure that you have these veterans when it comes to aspects of maybe the directorial process, or that may be foreign to you, that you can rely on to help you go through those kind of like those harder parts of making this movie.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You have to, I think, especially as a first-time feature director, I was looking for more experienced people to work with. And you mentioned Toby Yates. He really unfortunately passed away last
Oh, I'm very
November, very
sorry.
suddenly. Yeah, but he was I feel so lucky that I got the chance to work with him because I think he had, edited like 24 feature films. And at first I remember when I was beginning the edit with him, I was nervous because I thought, gosh, he's like, over 20 years older than me. He's got so much more experience. I was worried that he was going to maybe railroad me a little bit or not listen to me. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. He was so open to, what I wanted as a director. He really wanted to collaborate with me. And so it ended up just being such an incredible experience. And I know, sometimes people who work with people who are a lot more experienced, they don't get that. They do feel kind of steamrolled a little bit. So, yeah. So anyway, Toby in particular was someone who I just learned so much from. He was someone who had come up editing on film, and so even the way he wanted to approach the work was so fascinating to me. So, yeah, you want to work with people who make you better. And I'm actually in post-production on my second feature, and that I sort of the same mindset I kind of tried to take into that feature as well. And then also you end up working with people that you don't realize how important they're going to be to the process until you're in the process. Like my script supervisor on Scrap, her name is Carissa, and she was so helpful to me. And that's not maybe a role where like on your first feature, you're like, oh, my script supervisor is going to be one of the most important people on set, but she was. And actually then I dragged her kicking and screaming into my second feature as well. So for me, I'm really looking to build lifetime relationships with these artists. So yeah, it was a long process to kind of assemble all the crew, but I couldn't have gotten luckier.
Can I ask, filming in Los Angeles, it's so a lot of times I'll talk to people and the movies will be set in Los Angeles, but they're not filming in Los Angeles. They'll go maybe somewhere else in California and pretend it is, or I don't know, some other place and do so. It is kind of rare when I talk to filmmakers actually film in Los Angeles. Um, can this Scrap be the movie it is without the LA backdrop? Because to me, the environment of Los Angeles, I think, and the whole concept of Los Angeles being the dream factory, but for a lot of people, that dream can like turn into a nightmare, like just like a click of a finger, is a very real kind of situation. So what is about LA specifically that you think kind of works so well with this story of Beth and Ben, and also just kind of, from what I understand of Los Angeles, I haven't been there. I've heard a lot about it, but it's more kind of like of a business town more than anything else in industry, especially the filmmaking industry. It's such a big part of that business.
Well, Los Angeles is a very difficult city to film in, especially if you're making independent film. even to get a permit is like $1,000, right? So
Yeah.
it's not cheap. The locations are incredibly expensive. You're never going to get a location for free unless, you're married to the owner. It's very expensive. It's very difficult. But for this story, I felt like it had to be in Los Angeles precisely for what you said. I kind of joke that this movie is like the anti-La La Land.
Hmm.
It's really contrasting that idea of sort of the shining, glorious city on a hill that's going to make all your dreams come true versus the sort of gritty urban squalor and the reality of your life not turning out the way you wanted it to be. And I think that's true for every big city. I'm sure that's true for whether, you're French and that's Paris for you, or whether you're Australian and that's Sydney for you. I think that every country probably has like that city that represents that big dream. But for me as well, because I have basically spent my entire adult life in Los Angeles, I really knew very well what it was like to be, in my 20s and driving all over in my car and kind of feeling like I was just going from disaster to disaster and not being able to get a foothold. And I really wanted to portray what I felt was my authentic Los Angeles experience on screen. Obviously, I never experienced homelessness. Like I never kind of went to the depths that Beth goes through, but I wanted to do something that felt more authentic and portrayed Los Angeles in a way that maybe I had never seen before, that showed how funny and beautiful, but at the same time, kind of sad and lonely it can be.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. When it comes to that aspect you kind of touch on, the kind of homeless situation that's happening in Los Angeles, and there's similar things happening here in Sydney as well, where the cost of living is just, especially the last few years, has been incredibly hard for a lot of people, and a lot of, there are families living in caravans now, cars, etc. Beth, in this movie, she finds herself living in a car after she loses her job. Los Angeles, though, what's interesting about that place in regards to the homeless situation is that there is Skid Row, but it seems like Skid Row has expanded now, like even beyond that kind of area. And like, I've read stories and I've seen video of kind of like how even now in the suburbs of LA now, there's like situations there when it comes to that. How important was it for you to kind of really show that aspect of the LA experience of living? Because I think the number was like 50,000 people in LA now, like who were without homes, and up it's expanding even more. So how important was you to really touch on that situation? Because if you're going to make a movie about Los Angeles, and this is, essentially the anti-La La Land, you're popping the balloon of the fantasy to look really at the reality of the situation. That is an important aspect of that reality of LA living these days.
Yeah, it was super important. Beth as a character is right on that precipice, and she's almost not willing to accept how close she is to kind of falling into that life. And there was a scene I remember we shot where my character's just driving around in the car, and through the windshield we're seeing, various homeless encampments, and none of that was production design. I mean, that is all real tents, real people on the sidewalk that just were there when we went out to film. And that was not down in Skid Row. That was, not far from my neighborhood here in Hollywood. So yeah, we really wanted to show as much as we could of authentically what's going on in Los Angeles without, of course, being a documentary, because it's not. But yeah, Beth, she's sort of living between two extremes. She's driving around her car and seeing that, and then she's going back to her brother's house, which is like so nice and, clean and beautiful and in a lovely neighborhood. So you're really, through her experience, you're really kind of, we're able to toggle back and forth between those two sort of very different LA worlds.
Speaking of Beth, she's a very warts and all character. For some moments in the film, you feel incredible empathy for her. Other moments in the film, you feel incredible frustration towards her because she's a character who's living in a very desperate situation. But the desperate of a situation constantly collides with the delusion that she has of what her station is in life. She can't kind of let go of where she is right now. When you put together a character like that. What's it like trying to find the balance between the self-destructive nature of Beth's personality versus the very real kind of like, there's darkness behind her. She's gone through some stuff. She's like, she's, very, I wouldn't call her maybe emotionally immature, but there's definitely a reason for those feelings, and though that's a very psychological aspect of why she is how she is.
I mean, I would call her emotionally mature at the beginning.
Mhm.
We can call her that. Yeah, I remember my acting teacher used to say when we would sort of just talk about the psychology of, different characters and different stories, she would say sometimes that would remind us that which you resist persists, right? And Beth is someone who has not been particularly interested in doing any kind of self-examination. We learn later in the film why, that she's experienced a lot of trauma in her life, but um, I think no matter where you are in your life, whether you're getting all your dreams are coming true, whether 50% of your dreams are coming true, 10% of your dreams, 0%, whether you're getting everything you ever wanted or nothing, at some point, you still have to look inwards. No one escapes that. You never get away from it. You have to do some self-examination. You have to think back, why do I act this way? Or why do I self-sabotage? Why do I, you just no one get you don't no one gets out of life scot-free. So this is, I guess, one of those adult coming of age stories where you have a character who has just been putting off dealing with a lot of painful things for a very long time. And yeah, hopefully over the course of the movie we watch her grow, and even if she's not your favorite person by the end, at least we can understand her a little bit and see that she's trying to put forth some effort towards self-growth.
On the other side of Beth, you have Ben, played by Anthony Rapp, the older brother, very much like a parent figure he's more kind of like almost a protective kind of dad, because the story with background the characters, the parents die when they're younger. Ben practically raises Beth. Um, the theme of parenting throughout the film is very prevalent. You have Beth, who's a single mum. You have Stacey, played by Lana Parrilla, and Ben, they're a couple trying to have a child. But then you also have Ben, who kind of already does have a child in Beth, who's kind of like, I don't know, it seems like he's going through like Beth's like teenage rebellion phase. I don't know. I don't know how to really describe it. But the whole aspect of parenting in these three different ways is very kind of interesting. What was it about that theme, especially that you wanted to touch on in regards to this movie, especially in the different ways, different styles of parenting throughout the movie? I found that very interesting.
I think maybe part of the reason was even when I started working on the short, I was in my 30s. And I think, like a lot of women in your 30s, you have to sort of make that decision. Like, am I going to be a parent? Am I not going to be a parent? If I am, do I want a biological child? Because you don't have unlimited time as a woman, right, to make that decision. So I think probably it was just on my mind. And I was seeing so many of my friends also make that decision of whether or not to become a parent. Not that you can't be a parent later, but, biologically, if you want to give birth to a child, you sort of have to start making plans. And so I think it was maybe a little bit just in all of our collective consciousness, but I also find that really interesting. Originally, Ben was not necessarily going to be that much older, but then when we
Mhm.
cast Anthony in the short and he and I kind of had this great dynamic, I thought, yeah, there was something very interesting about siblings who are 10 years apart. And there is a very, creates a little bit of a challenging dynamic where he is sort of the surrogate father figure, especially because we learn in the film that their parents died when they were younger. And so they've kind of been robbed a little bit of like a normal sibling relationship because he has had to play the surrogate father. So she's got this sort of rebellious attitude towards him. But they're obviously very, very close and do love each other very much. So I thought that was just a dynamic I hadn't seen explored very often in films about siblings. So it was something I was very interested to explore. And also, actually, I really wanted to see a male character who really longed for a child. I thought we hadn't really explored
Mm.
the male desire for fatherhood. It's not something I see very much in film. So I really liked writing those scenes where Anthony's character Ben he's got his binder and he's like trying to, understand all the IVF procedures, and he's really, really wanting to be a dad. And I just thought there was something really sweet and really refreshing about that.
Anthony's character Ben in the movie, he's a novelist. Um, I heard in the interview that when you were a kid, you actually wanted to be a novelist when you grew up, and then as you got older, your sister was doing theater and stuff. You're like, I want to be like her, and you kind of changed tact. Were your young dreams of being a novelist something that you projected onto the Ben character in this movie?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I don't even know if I wanted to be a novelist. I think I was just obsessed with Joe and Little Women. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
but I always was writing like stories and all kinds of things as a kid. Yeah, I think a little bit. I also think in Ben, it was an opportunity to sort of explore maybe some of my own frustrations that had experienced as an actor, where you get kind of pigeonholed into a certain kind of role. Like he's writing these fantasy novels and he's doing very well, but he's not that he doesn't want to keep doing that. You know, he wants to write this Billie Holiday biography, and no one is going to let him do such a big pivot. You just don't, you don't see that very often in the fiction world, where someone's, writing these fiction genre projects, and then all of a sudden they switch to like a biography. So yeah, maybe a little bit, but I thought it was just a fun dynamic as well. And frankly, I needed him for story purposes to be at the house a lot. So
Mm.
he had to have some sort of career where he was working from home.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Speaking of, you mentioned Billie Holiday because Ben's working on his Billie Holiday biography. Billie Holiday is a prominent part in the movie. Her music's in the film. We talked about there's a cool scene at the end of the film where Ben gets his cool Billie Holiday poster. It's very much like a muse kind of figure to both the characters in the movie. Where did the Billie Holiday kind of aspect of the whole thing come from? Is that Billie Holiday someone for you who holds a special place in your heart as well as both a person and an artist?
Yeah, I mean, so I would actually say that era of music is actually, my sister in real life loves all of those artists from that era. You know, she's like so knowledgeable, has so many records from all of those artists, Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday, and so I think maybe I stole a little bit of that from her. But also I think Billie Holiday in particular is like sort of the quintessential artist that turns pain into something beautiful. And I think for both the characters, they need that. And so she's kind of like the guiding post for how to do that for them. And I wanted that kind of jazz music. We used some other songs throughout the film to a little bit play into that idea of like La La Land or Woody Allen's Manhattan, the sort of like beautiful, dreamy city. But I also thought Billie Holiday would be the right artist with which to do that, because again, it's sort of, if you don't listen to the lyrics, her music sounds so beautiful, and then when you kind of listen to what's really going on underneath the music, there's so much pain and beauty as well, but there's a lot of complexity there that I thought would be just an interesting aspect to this film.
I usually have a couple silly questions I like to have on the side, just curiosities I have when I watch movies. The first thing I want to ask about is, so there's a part in the movie where Lana's character of Stacy pretty much accuses Beth of like, I think she's taking drugs or whatever. And Beth's like, I don't take drugs, never done since college. But she does have an addiction. That addiction is retail or retail therapy. She doesn't have the money to do so, but she's constantly buying stuff. There's always like a pile of stuff from eBay or Amazon, whatever, like at her brother's doorstep all the time. Is it right to me to guess that she is trying to find solace in her situation by through her addiction with retail? Is that like a correct assumption on my part?
I think definitely that is 100% accurate. And I think, to be honest, I think that was also just like me making fun of myself a little bit, because there's, definitely been times in my life where things haven't been going well, and you're like, I don't know, you're like passing by a store and you're like, I'm I'm gonna buy that thing, just to kind of try to make yourself feel better.
Mm.
But yeah, that sounds really financially irresponsible. But yes, I mean, like everyone, I'm obsessed. I buy so much junk on Amazon that I probably don't need. And I think, yeah, like LA is a very well, it's a very consumerist, right, city, and it's a city that perception is incredibly important. So she is probably someone who is always comparing her clothes to other people's. Does she have the right shoes? Does she have the right shade of lipstick or whatever? So I thought like someone it felt natural to me that somebody who was very appearance conscious would sort of have this like huge Amazon wish list.
My next one, silly, I guess you can put it under silly question, but it's more of a curiosity on my part. When I first started doing reviews and writing and such, my perception of what filmmakers and filmmakers is vastly different to all these years later. I've been doing it for like 18 years now, and because of all the filmmakers I've talked to, and you talk about the processes and the struggles and everything out. You have now made a film or two films, because you got Say On to the other film. You said you're in post on that one as well. When you now look back at films that maybe you would have watched when you're a teenager or in college, whatever, growing up, your Woody Allen's or what have you, the movies that would have maybe inspired what you do today. Do you look at them now through a different eyes as compared to the ones beforehand, because now you've been in the trenches as a director as opposed to before just being a theater actor or film actor? Is there a difference between the way you view films now as to was maybe 5, 6 years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest shift has been I used to always watch films and I would always be watching them through the lens of the acting, right? Like looking at the relationships between the characters, the actors, the performances. That was always what really captured my attention, what I focused on. I still do that a lot. Like it really bothers me if I watch a film, like if I watch it, even like an independent film even, and it doesn't matter to me like how well it's shot if the performances are not like I don't buy them, even if it's like a husband and wife and I just don't believe that they're married. It drives me crazy for like the whole movie. But yeah, I would say now and also because Seance, my second feature, is a psychological thriller. It is genre. So I actually went back and watched a lot of 1950s, 1960s, kind of Hitchcock movies, those kind of films, and Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman. And when I was going back and watching those films, even though I'd seen all of them before, I was looking at them much more from the director perspective, and I would say in general, watching films now, I'm paying a lot more attention to the choices, the editing choices, the lighting, um, everything, the composition, the lenses. I'm much more interested in the technical aspects than I ever was 5 or 6 years ago.
The film is out now in regards on the film festival circuit, is doing really well. Has been for about, say maybe almost a year now, collecting awards from all over the place. You've been in Naples, you've been in Colorado, you've been all different places, all different type of cinemas. What we're looking at next is the next step is distribution. I always say, it's one thing to make a film, it's another thing to try to get it out there to the masses. And I encourage everyone out there to go to scrapthefilm.com so you can find out where screenings are. Because if you do have a screening in your city, if it's playing at a film festival, I really, really encourage people to watch the film and as soon as you can, and watch it in theaters, because this is a movie that needs to be seen in the theaters, I think. And I always encourage people to watch independent films in theaters, because we need more independent films in theaters. When it comes to the distribution aspect of it all, do we have a feeling that maybe by the end of the year, maybe we're going to see Scrap out there and ready to go for the general public to be able to watch it?
Yeah, definitely by the end of the year, it'll be on VOD. And I'm hoping to be able to organize a limited theatrical run before then. So it's just a question of kind of how quickly we can get started with that. But yes, absolutely, by the end of the year, Scrap will be out on VOD, which actually will be wild because I first started working on it in 2016. So when it finally comes out in 2024, it'll be, how many years is that? 8 years?
Mm.
It'll have been 8 years since I first got the idea. So I almost feel like part of me is like not dreading it because I want it to be out in the world, but I'm also feeling like, what am I even going to do with myself if I'm not promoting this film? So I guess I'll just have to focus on the next film.
I was speaking to a couple filmmakers last night, and they were working on their film for several years as well. Um, Actually, to a number of different filmmakers, and they always kind of one filmmaker kind of equated the letting go of a long-term project as kind of like saying goodbye to your kids as they go to college. You know, you've done all you
Oh, I
can,
like
and
that.
you know, off you go. You know, kind of thing. I can't.
I
It's in your hands now. You know.
I like that actually. That's a good way of, I think, thinking of it. It's like, they're not dead. They've just moved off to university.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I've having not been through this process before. It's just been it's been an incredible experience, to go through my first feature from the inception of the idea to pre-production, financing, production, post-production, now the distribution process. Um yeah, it's been wild.
So for everyone out there, scrapthefilm.com. I will put the link in my production notes for people to check out. They can check out the great reviews. They can check out the screenings. So we got upcoming, we've got the Lonely Seal Film Festival in Arlington, August 24. You got the Fort Smith International Film Festival, Fort Smith, Arizona. And you can just look at the list of just how many places it's been, the list of awards it's got. And there's a reason why it's won all these awards. It's a fantastic movie, Vivian. You've done really great job here. The movie really it's incredibly touching, but also I love watching movies that are kind of based in Los Angeles, because it's a place that I always wanted to visit, but I've always kind of intimidated by it to visit, because I'm not sure like what is Los Angeles as opposed to what you see on screen as opposed to reality. And I think Scrap is one of those films, one of those Los Angeles movies that kind of like breaks through the veneer of what the sheen of what people think Los Angeles is, to talk about the reality of it. It's a place made with people, sometimes people with broken dreams, but sometimes also places where people, just find themselves in. There's something that Beth does in this movie, and Ben as well. Ben goes through his own journey as well. So I really recommend everyone to check out Scrap. If you can find it, scrapthefilm.com. And Vivian, if you have any news in regards to the movie coming out, on whether it be that, limited theatrical, which I do hope it does get, because, more indie films in the theaters better, or VOD, what have you, please let me know so I can let everyone else know so they can watch the film that I watched, because I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoyed our talk as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I absolutely will let you know. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.